was a description of humility, an epitome of humility, then the general who has fallen is indeed a symbol of humility.
General Ogolla, despite being a very tough general and commander, who is celebrated for his various accomplishments, was also a very humorous man. He was full of very good jokes, and many a time in tense situations, he would make everybody feel comfortable.
General Francis Ogolla stood head and shoulders among the finest of exemplary public servants. It has been an extraordinary privilege to work closely with him to benefit from his wisdom, experience, and insights.
How is it possible that we learn so much about an individual? You know, in my adult life, I have attended many a funeral service, witnessed the passing of many people. I have never heard so much being said about one individual like we did with the general, Linus.
Yes, and indeed, what really stood out is the consistency of the stories told about General Ogolla. These people who are giving tributes were not seated in some room to decide that this is what they're going to say about General Ogolla. Even, I think 2 days ago you were here with Brigadier retired Ahmed. Mm-hmm. And he spoke here and narrated how he worked with him. But when you look at also at the stories given by his family, particularly, people who are different levels of the family, their brothers, the immediate family, that's the children, the consistency of the narrative was really, really impressive. And there is one thing that came through. This was a consummate professional, one of the best individuals produced by the Kenya Air Force. He excelled. And then it comes out in death, something that probably very few people knew, including we in the media, of just how simple General Ogolla was as a person, how he was a man of the people, a man of his soldiers. We noticed he used to do, I think, run twice a week with his soldiers in the Ulinzi complex. And look, it died in the company of very junior, if you can put it. There were sergeants there. There was a major, and the highest ranking was a brigadier, who is that is about 3 ranks below the general. So I think it was also a statement. Look at the company in which he died. I know this was one of the key areas of speculation, was why is he in the company of young and junior people who are quite junior with him. But I also noticed, I mean, in the footage that was we've seen from Ulinzi, that he was running with the same people, very junior ranked officers, because that was him. This is a person who was close to the ground. I don't know, we've seen another video of him making calls to the field, talking to a junior military officer, who first of all denies and says, no, mimi na CDF. Yes. How can we be talking? So these are stories that came through, and in a very, very clear way.
Yeah, sorry, before you go, can we listen to some of the sound bites that just buttress what you were saying, Linus, especially from the family, where the son talked about, he was never enamored by the role, the title, power. Let's listen to that.
Mzee lying over here, the casket he's lying in is a very simple mbao ambayo hata haijapigwa randa, is very rough. I've just been told it actually costed 6,800 shillings. And Matthew 5:3, Beatitudes of Jesus, it says that blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. He was the poorest man in spirit. Hizi cheskas mingi, ofisi kubwa, watu kumuita CDF, General, sir. To him it was all vanity. It was a necessary thing for him to be able to fulfill his job.
He's in the parallel program. He's based in Laikipia Air Base. He's commuting between Nanyuki and Nairobi for classes, for exams. And those of you who've been to University of Nairobi know it's not an easy path. And Operation Linda Inchi was fully in session, and he had a lot of responsibilities in Laikipia Air Base across the borders, and this man excelled. He got a first-class honors with my generation. He was in class with my peers.
Carol was a special child in our family. In fact, our mother really loved him more than us. So sometimes we could just prick his head, because he was loved too much. As we are being beaten, and him, he was not being beaten. My brother is a kind man, loyal man.
Yeah, and those stories are the same. Yeah. I mean, I saw Leonard Idao talking about an encounter they had with him when they wanted to use the Lindsay complex, how helpful he was. Dr. Oluga, who was talking about a medical camp that he helped put together. All of these stories, just to go to what Linus was saying, from different people across different parts of the country, different professions, all of them having very similar stories of a man who was humble and who was very helpful, and and
I don't think when he was doing any of that, he was expecting anything in return. Yeah, he was doing it because he was in a position that he could. He was helping, he was making a difference, he was doing it because he could do it. And a lot of people are not like that. And when you're listening to them say that, you're thinking, when I die, I hope people say that about me, because he's humble, he did this, he did that, he touched my life in this way or the other, he did something small. Maybe after he had forgotten most of those things that he had done, but they did have an impact. And I remember his sister speaking, and we talk about how he said he wanted to be buried within 72 hours, and his son mentioned it. I don't know if, Roba, we've played the bite that talks about his casket and that he wanted to be wrapped in sheets. To be buried like that, because those are his wishes. And his sister was saying, when he was telling her that, he was telling her, usisumbue watu, nimesema nataka kuzikwa baada ya siku mbili, within 48 hours. But because nakujua wewe utasumbua watu, nimekuongezea a few more hours. I want to be buried after 72 hours, na akampeleka akamwambia ni hapa nataka kuzikwa. And he didn't want to be buried in a casket, and he wanted to be buried in a shroud, and that's what happened from what his son said. And for us in Islam, that's how we bury quickly, and we bury them in the white shroud. So it shows the simplicity, the kind of person he was. I think he didn't want people to mourn for so long. He didn't want it to be a long, drawn thing in terms of now saying goodbye to him. And something else, Yvonne, that really that touched my heart and caught my eye was when the hearse was moving from Kisumu all the way to his home in Siaya, and how people were crowded by the side of the roads just to say bye to one of their own. The fact that now ameondoka. And the member of parliament for that area spoke about how when General Ogolla was appointed, he asked, where is this gentleman from? Nakambua ametoka village yako. And your constituency, and it goes to show about the kind of person he was. Hakuwa anajisema sana, mimi natoka mahali fulani, mimi nafaa kujulikana. And the difference he made in the community. They were talking about what he had done for the school that he went to. He had built a church that he was supposed to help build a church in his village. There was supposed to be a ceremony that Sunday for the church. He had built a school, and he had all these plans that he had for the school and for the area. And I remember his son saying that he plans to continue with whatever his father had wanted to do. So all those things that people are saying about him, as Lina said, there was no rehearsed script. They did not sit and say tutasema hivi na hivi kumhusu. It's because of the kind of person he was and the gap that his dying has left in their lives, and how much fulfillment he gave them, and how much satisfaction he gave them, and how much he meant to them in one way or another. So it's really, really a loss. Yeah,
and this was a big moment for the country and for something, we've called it unprecedented and tragic, wasn't it, Sam? Never before witnessed in this country in all its history.
Right, and I mean, looking at the man, General Ogolla, and as we say, his humility that very much involved on the ground, visiting different troops on what actions they were going on, what service they were providing to the country. And I remember that Thursday afternoon while we were sitting conversing about, excuse me, the plan for the evening, and then news started circulating on different platforms, whether it's social media or calls that were going through the country, and people talking about the chopper that had gone down. I remember us having to discuss even so, what was the chopper like, how many people were involved, what was the mission like, realizing that just a few days before, the president had actually given instructions on how the schools in the disturbed zone was supposed to be reopened using the services of the military. And I remember us having to wait for several hours to really get information and proper communication from the President of the Republic, obviously knowing that such a matter required that level of authority. And when the news broke, I mean, it was shocking that losing a general, the senior most military man or military officer in the country. And I think at some point you feel like we haven't appreciated of what just happened a week ago, to an extent that, yes, it is unprecedented, but it's something that has never been witnessed. It is too serious to an extent that you saw what that caused. The National Security Council was convened to have a discussion, the developments that had just taken place that afternoon. And now getting to that point that you start hearing of people asking questions, what could have gone wrong? Because, I mean, this is probably the most protected person after the president, and traveling to such a zone, obviously knowing that the danger involved. And you actually read from the statement of the president that the general had been briefed on the situation of security by the officers that are on the ground, to an extent that you expect that there was already a brief showing that it was safe for him to fly to that region. In fact, he was able to go to different stopovers, and it's only the last one that he was headed to Uasin Gishu that now became a challenge, leading to the death of himself alongside 10 other officers. So I think the calls to get into the probe are quite important, especially if a country is to protect the very important officers that serve this country at that level. And I heard the president saying that he is confident that this probe will be made public. I'm not sure about the possibility of that, knowing too well how military affairs are managed in this country. But obviously, it is pointing to a question that the country will have to answer to at some point. But I am also persuaded, probably by now, the National Security Council and the president would actually have a hint of what exactly transpired that afternoon leading to the 2:20 p.m. crash. So I think moving forward, if the team that was deployed to go and carry out the probe have not yet concluded, or they do not have a preliminary report, then this is information that really needs to be brought on board. As to whether the country will be informed of that communication, I do not know, knowing too well that certain matters are too critical for national security. But then again, Yvonne, you reflect on even the sentiments that were aired during those moments that the country was coming together to mourn the late General Ogolla, and even some of the controversies surrounding his appointment. If you may recall, on several occasions the president was heard, including in an interview, speaking about how he was able to appoint General Ogolla to the office of the Chief of Defense Forces. And it just comes to the fore to make you reflect on what did those statements mean at a time that obviously the president may have wanted to be as transparent as possible, but they also raised questions about what then that means politically. You saw even Adin Duale, the cabinet secretary for defense matters, sort of exonerating blame from the late CDF, speaking about the situation that there were mobile or text messages that are available that the general had shown, indicating of what was transpiring, especially when it comes to his presence at the Bomas of Kenya. This was brought on board by Wafula Chebukati, who was the chairperson of the IEBC at that time, in his affidavit to the Supreme Court, indicating that a team from the National Security Advisory Committee came to the Bomas of Kenya, and he listed the people that are in that team and said that, yes, General Ogolla was there, that time as the Vice CDF, but the only person that spoke was Kennedy Kihara, who was the Principal Administrative Secretary. So that obviously has been a stain on his career, of course. What is the word? Amplified by the president himself when he was speaking about that reality. So then at such a time that this has happened, obviously we're left with those sentiments of as they were aired during those events of mourning the general. Yeah, and besides all of the great attributes, it was interesting that then the ghosts of Bomas, like you say, were, you know, sort of revived, and we'll get to hear what the president had to say about it, you know, on Saturday, the day before he was buried. But Linus, you know, I found it interesting that for over a year, there had been this narrative that had been spun in the country about the role that he played. And suddenly there were revelations that were obviously very well known to these individuals. I mean, if there were text messages that were shared on the 15th of August 2023, yet this never came out. And there was a narrative that was not just allowed to prevail, but was purveyed and propagated by the very people who were now having some sort of mea culpa right there. And an interesting one because, I mean, the man is no longer with us, and suddenly we're having all of these serious revelations for which he cannot corroborate. Interesting that all of this, perhaps not too late, but, you know, it comes in death.
A bit late, actually,
yeah,
because Ogolla was not there to listen to them now say these things. And I would like us to listen to C.S. Duale talking about the text messages, because this was a very, very interesting twist, and it was a revelation, basically, that was hitherto unknown.
And as a Muslim, General Ogolla shared with me text messages. General Ogolla, as a respectable soldier and general, he asked and sent a text message to his bosses and asked, what am I going to do in Bomas? And this has happened. And General Ogolla was told, it's been decided, you go. And General Ogolla then again sent a text message and saying, now that the result will be announced at 3, as a general, as a soldier, what am I doing here?
Yes, and Robert, I just want us to go further down our rundown, because Duale went on for very long. C.S. Duale went on for very long to explain the circumstances of that day and those text messages. And at some point, he really stated it in 21 about what this should be about.
And the people who sent him to Bomas, some of them are here. Some of the people who sent him to Bomas, some of the people who sent him to Bomas are known. Let us not create a false narrative about General Ogolla.
Yeah, Yvonne, this was late. Let's not create a false narrative about General Ogolla. And we know how politicians, from the president downwards, really milked the presence of Ogolla in Bomas of Kenya during the controversial date of 15th of August. That's the day that the election results were released. And we will shortly hear from the president himself what his take on that day was. But before we do that, James Orengo spoke about the same. James Orengo, the governor of Siaya, spoke about Bomas. Let's listen to him.
The lingering doubt is that there is this allegation that General Ogolla went to Bomas to try and change the elections. But General Ogolla, the way I know him, and I've gone to see him, even on political issues, and he will tell me if it is that, wachana nayo.
The defense of Ogolla was actually a dominating subject there, and I think one of the members of parliament also, that's his local member of parliament, the member of parliament for Alego, Honorable Sam Atandi, also spoke about the legacy of Ogolla with regards to the Bomas saga.
This to go on record that General Ogolla, who is seated here, will not be engaged in something like that.
Yes, and I now want us to go back to Saturday. All those sound bites you've had there, that was in Ngia village in Siaya, where General Ogolla was laid to rest. But the day before that, and that is the Saturday, there was a huge military event at the Ulinzi complex where the president spoke, and also spoke about something that he had not spoken about before in relation to the events of August 15th. Let's listen to President Ruto.
I asked General Ogolla for a meeting, and I had a one-on-one, man-to-man, come to Jesus meeting with General Ogolla. And when we concluded that meeting, General Ogolla told me the following: Mr. President, I have no defense. I will not try to defend myself. It was wrong what happened. And you have three choices. Either send me to court-martial or have me retired.
I think on this one, this was very interesting because, first of all, there is absolutely no way of corroborating that conversation. This was the president's story against a coffin. It's not possible to know what exactly transpired. But, you know, we can assess the possibilities there. What was there to court-martial General Ogolla about? Is that actually how it works? That you are a member of the National Security Advisory Committee that then instructs you to be present somewhere as per Duale texts. But somehow, what the president is telling us is, Ogolla said, I'm guilty. Yeah. I was in Bomas. And Mambo ni Matatu. By the way, that's another Mambo ni Matatu. Right. There was court-martial.
Resign?
Resign.
Or forgive.
Or forgive. There's only one big problem with that narrative. It's like picking a conversation with a coffin. It actually breaks basic rules of funerals. You don't start a conversation that goes that way because it's going to be one way. But again, the next day, that is the day of the SMS texts by the CS Duale, again, point in a different direction. So would it show this text and then say that, we have three options? I think this is, and I really hope this should be the end of this conversation, because we are almost nearing a place where we are approaching institutional erosion, where you erode the respect. You know, the military and civilian relationship is guided entirely by respect. Just respecting what you do and respecting who your leaders are, the generals, the merit system they have of rising to where they are. And that is what a commander-in-chief gives in return. Remember, a commander-in-chief doesn't go through necessarily, especially in our civilian arrangement, where you are elected a completely different path, campaign rallies and political system, to rise to the commander-in-chief. And the people you'll be commanding, some of them, and our analyst, Brigadier, retired, explained the rigorous process to make, let alone a general, just to create somebody like a major, a colonel, let alone a brigadier, all the way to the general. So I think that respect should not be tampered with. And I think this Bomas Ogolla thing has been overdone for political reasons. It's been overplayed. We should have hoped that it just disappears from the funeral. It shouldn't turn up. Because remember, the president has asserted many times that Ogolla was among people who wanted to overturn my election. And I just want to say this, Yvonne. You know, typically soldiers don't overturn election results. They overthrow governments. Yeah. And in the West African belt, where the space, that respect between civilian rule and military might is very thin, they've done it a couple of times. There is an entire belt of the Sahel right now that is under military rule. Yeah. And something you need to notice, they're not even senior military, they're not generals. These are captains, these are colonels who are politically engaged. And I mean, when you listen to the president of Burkina Faso and the president of Mali, they are switched on. They understand the issues and all that. Now, when that respect collapses, those are the environments. So we need to give our military the respect they deserve. They are not the typical military of other parts of the world. Now, Ogolla was in Bomas because of the poor quality of a civilian instruction. He wasn't there because he was sent by General Kibochi. Well, let's be given some more texts to say who actually sent him. You will realize that he wasn't deployed by the military. He was there as a member of a representative of someone in the ANSAC. So let's not overdo these things. There's so much might in the hands of the military. A lot of it. They can not only overturn results, they can overturn a government. And we should really respect the discipline and the professionalism of the Kenyan military. And you can do that by showing respect to their leaders, including General Ogolla, because look at the story of General Ogolla right now, how he rose through the ranks. Everybody knows that this was a journey of merit.
Yes. Perfection.
Perfection. Yeah. He earned his stars. And over a very long period of time. Don't reduce his career to some closely contested election at Bomas.
I mean, the length of his career was literally the time I have been alive on this earth. I just wanted to add one last thing, because I wanted to talk about the succession. So on August the 15th, 2022, there were texts that Duale received. He then went on to become the Minister of Defense. But in May 2023, in an interview that the president had, a joint media interview, he then openly said that that man tried to overturn my election. That was the one, was that the one you were at, Sam? Or that was the one our colleague Ayub Abdikadir? It was either one of those.
That was in May.
That was in May last year.
Which was Ayub.
Yeah, but
on 4th of January, he had also mentioned a few things in saying that one day, when all these matters are investigated, the country will be shocked at what was transpiring at the Bomas of Kenya.
And now it's, so for me, it's that, so if August 15, 2022, there are texts that exonerate him, but in May 2023, the president is adamant that he tried to overturn his, including up until Saturday, the day of his, and then suddenly, you know, the Minister of Defense or the Cabinet Secretary of Defense reveals these texts. Did he not reveal them to his boss, the president, this entire time, even after his very public pronouncements on what he claims was an attempt to overturn his election? So what do we believe? How are we supposed to, I mean, for a whole year plus, you had these texts, but you continue to vilify him? Who's not talking to who, or who's telling us the truth? How do we believe any of that?
Actually, let's quote the president, because he spoke on 14th of May 2023 in that interview at State House, and he said, I called him Ogolla, I sat him down and told him, you went to Bomas to try to overturn my victory, but because you're the best person to be general, I am going to give you the job. And of course, he was speaking in relation to how he was the most qualified person. He also said that, and this was at the swearing in of General Ogolla, that on the 29th of April, in considering your appointment, I assessed your background, where you have come from, what you have done, your journey in the military, and I am satisfied that you merit the office. He also said that, so this was Ogolla saying that with great humility, I thank you for the trust and confidence in appointing me to serve as the Chief of Defense Forces. And obviously, that is the time that he was taking over from General Kibochi.
Yeah.
And around that time, there are a lot of political leaders that are actually opposed to the appointment of General Ogolla as the Chief of Defense Forces, which I think the president acknowledged. But now, what I find interesting is that on the 20th of April 2023, a statement came promoting General Ogolla to the position, to the rank of lieutenant, general, from lieutenant general to general, and naming him as the Chief of Defense Forces. Yeah. Now we hear the president saying that he made that decision against the advice of everyone who had written to him. He says that he had received a lot of recommendations, I think about 10 of them, and none of them had the name of General Ogolla for the position of CDF. So it is a bit contradictory, not even a bit, it's quite contradictory, bearing in mind that the statement on 20th of April was referring to after a meeting of the Defense Council. Yeah. And the Defense Council is chaired by the Cabinet Secretary for Defense Affairs. This is Aden Duale. It is also attended by the service commanders, the Kenya Army, the Kenya Navy, as well as the Kenya Air Force. And at that time, the CDF was also a member of the Defense Council. Yes. The CDF at that time was General Kibochi. So that meeting would appear to have been cited by that statement that came appointing General Ogolla to that position. So if that statement was true on the 28th, and the president confirmed it on 29th when he was swearing in General Ogolla, what changes a year before the end of, just before the end of 1 year after that, to an extent that now we hear there were 10 recommendations and none of them was pointing towards the direction of General Ogolla, that he had to make an individual decision. And this is critical. This is critical, bearing in mind that moving forward, there has to be the question of succession, because at the moment we understand that the Vice CDF, that is Lieutenant General Charles Kahariri, is serving the position of VCDF, but acting as the CDF. Of course, all the operations of the Defense Forces now, it is him that is supposed to report. And of course, the position of CDF is to advise the President and the Cabinet Secretary for Defense Affairs on matters relating to the military. So he may continue with that work for now. But a substantive appointment is obviously expected. And if you're looking at even what the Constitution provides, the KDF Act provides, but also the Tonje rules in terms of circulating the position through the different services. So if this has been the time of General Ogolla from the Kenya Air Force, before him was General Kibochi from the Kenya Army. Before him was General Mwathethe, who came from the Kenya Navy. So the next in line would be the Kenya Navy. If you look at the Kenya Navy, the senior most officers, you're talking about Charles Kahariri, who is currently the Vice CDF. The other person is Jameson Mutai, who until March of this year was serving as the service commander commander for the Kenya Navy. At that time, he was a major general. He was promoted to lieutenant general. So you have 2 lieutenant generals in the position, lieutenant generals within the Kenya Navy. One of them is a vice CDF. The other one is a vice chancellor of the Defense University. Yeah. So the president has a choice to pick from there. Right. He may have to look at the seniority. We do not know. Again, the Defense Council, chaired by Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale, involving who? Charles Kahariri as the VCDF. There's service commanders David Tarus from the Kenya Army, Jameson Longiro from, not Jameson Longiro, but Omende from, John Omende from the Kenya Air Force.
The Air Force, yeah.
Right, and then of course you have the person who is leading, I'll get the name, Major General leading the Kenya Navy. They are to sit in that and decide who becomes and advise the president. But
there is also Lieutenant General Mutai, and from what the brigadier was saying, there are all of these rules, but remember, it is up to the discretion of the commander-in-chief as to the decision that is to be made. And the Tonje rules, while being part of tradition, aren't particularly legally binding on that. Ladies and gentlemen, I want us to just very quickly talk about another big conversation that's been taking place. 43 days of the doctor strike, if we can just make sure that we say a little something about this. Unless, Linus, I know there's much to say about succession. Do you want to talk about succession just a little bit? Actually, maybe give us some final...
Just a quick point.
Yes, final points.
Especially because President Ruto made a very, very clear commitment during the funeral of General Ogolla. President Ruto spoke about ethnicity. He spoke about merit. And I don't know whether we have that quick soundbite from Ogolla, but he did speak about, in apparent reference to the succession. And I think what the country expects is that the president will keep his word in letting merit decide how the command of the military will be structured. Because the essence of Tonje rules was to try and make the military, to make merit in the military to work. Basically, so that if you are working hardest, if you are good, if you are a good soldier and a good officer, you can rise to whatever levels. So there'll be, I think there'll be a lot of Kenyans watching this very, very closely. And they'll watch this because they know the story of how the security sector in this country has worked. For some accident, and I spoke about our ethnicities last time, so I'm Maasai again.
For avoidance of doubt.
Yeah, for avoidance of doubt, yeah. The succession games in the military have always been very intriguing because there is this accident of, can I call it nature, that somehow always makes a general or the head of the military to come from the same tribe as the president. Whether you're talking of President Moi, President Kibaki, and President Uhuru, and now President Ruto. Let these accidents be merit-based. Because yes, it's true, there'll be village mates who would actually arise up the ranks meritoriously. And yes, let them be CDF, let them be whatever position, but not at the expense of somebody and not on account of their ethnic backgrounds. The day we'll overcome that will be a day when we'll all enjoy the professional spaces. General Ogolla, and maybe I should have also mentioned that there was a tinge and a touch of ethnic profiling when it came to the question of Ogolla. Because probably of the region. And the president himself actually at some point spoke about it, that, you didn't vote for me, but you have the head of the military. We need to move away from that. This was a good fighter pilot. This was a good soldier. It doesn't matter which water body he comes from, whether it's Tana River or Lake Victoria. So there is need to restore, some go back to how things have been working. Keep the military and names of military officers out of our politics. Keep them out of bombers. Keep them out of this debate about who becomes next. Through Tonje rules, they themselves, in their own very good wisdom, decided
organize themselves.
This is a national entity, and it will work best if we give merit a chance, and if we make merit the only basis of appointing our officers going forward. And I think and we hope that the president will also protect that. And Sam, I remember you spoke about the list. You know, appointing generals, really, it should be the space of the commander-in-chief. It's not an opinion poll where you call your campaign team to give ideas and suggest. Because you saw a number of them saying, oh, most of us did not want, but we, you don't want as who?
The CNC.
The head of the military is not a political issue. It's not going to be brought to the party headquarters to decide who is best for the president. This is where wisdom now of the commander-in-chief comes in, where it's him, his mind, and the country, and the military. And it's a very lonely space. So this is not something that you take to the national delegates conference in
all in favor.
In Kasarani. Yes. Those in favor of Ogolla, acclamation. You don't do that. It's a very thoughtful process that has to be very, very careful. And of course, there are basics that all commander-in-chiefs, I'm sure, consider, and that is loyalty. And you know what? The Kenyan military has demonstrated absolute loyalty to country and flag. You can pick any of them. And they can come from any village. They don't have to come from yours.
That's right. That's right. I want us to close on that. Jamila, just do a bit of a wrap-up of where we've been with